Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you all for coming. For the UNM folks, this may be a lot of review, but for those of you who are not at UNM, you will hopefully walk away with not just UNM specific information, but information on really preparing students for navigating online education more generally. So I work at UNM Online. We are an administrative support unit. So we don't necessarily own all of the degree completion programs. We are sort of a liaison between departments and academic advisors to make sure that all of the curriculum meets very specific state and federal regulatory standards, as well as, just sort of working out kinks with advisement and just really focusing on assisting our students. We do have three branches, just a little bit about us. I'm part of the marketing recruitment outreach and success team, along with Tina Zuniga, who's here, and Samantha. We also have a curriculum planning and compliance team who's really focused on the curriculum for double checking that the curriculum for certain programs can be offered online. And so we sort of give our stamp of approval at the end of the day when a program is being considered, online. And then just adhering to those regulatory measures that I kind of alluded to earlier. And then we have an incredible data analytics and management team who basically gives us all of the information that we need about our online students. This is our team, along with myself. Rick Robb is also one of the senior student success specialists. And so while Rick and I sort of work on an ongoing basis with students, we work primarily with students who are already admitted, current students. Maybe it's UNM students who are transitioning from a branch campus, or maybe it's a student who was an in-person student who's wanting to maybe change their degree. We can sort of walk them through all of that logistics and process. Samantha, on the other hand, works as recruitment. So she's basically fielding leads that we get from various advertising campaigns that our department does, and really just that introductory face, so to speak, for students who are considering UNM as an option. So we do a lot for students. Even though we're not academic advisors, we're considered integrated advisors. So we bring our expertise on online education and how it works to students, just to let them know what they can expect. We reach students through email campaigns that we do 3 times a semester, sometimes more if we, with us piloting more ways in connecting with students. We'll send a welcome email starting a couple weeks before classes even start. That way students can get sort of a leg up, right? If they're checking their email every day, which we hope they do, get a leg up on the information that is important for the upcoming semester. We'll send a mid-course email to students just as a hang in there. We know it's midterms and it's a very stressful time. So here's a reminder of all of our resources. And then of course, the congratulatory email at the end of the semester, either in December or May. We have a blog that is spearheaded by my coworker, Rick, that has a really great overview of programs, like a deep dive into one specific program, how it operates, a little bit about the folks who teach in that program, and maybe even sometimes students who are giving their own perspectives on the program, as well as just really good general information about how online education works at UNM, what to expect as an online student. We recently did one busting some myths about online education, which I'll touch on later. We hold advisement hours where folks can pop in. It doesn't even need to be students. It could be staff who are at UNM, maybe considering going back to school, either for their master's or maybe a second bachelor's degree, something like that. On our website, we have a chat bot that pulls information from all over the place. So if that's a really great place to go if you're not able to catch us during working hours. And so we really just serve as a resource connection for students and really getting out information on our social media with relevant information for them. So this is a little bit about specifically UNM's online student population. As you can see, our breakdown is not the traditional college student. Students are in their mid-30s on average, and are seeking either, some sort of ongoing education for upskilling in their current positions, whether that's finishing the bachelor's degree that they started that they never finished, or leveling up with a master's degree. It's a pretty even split between grads and undergrads, although we have more graduate programs, as you'll see in later slides. And there's a list of our most popular programs. And as you can see, even though we sort of promote our online programs out of state, the majority of folks in our programs are New Mexico residents. So students have a lot of options. We have over 30 degree and certificates and minors as well. So certain majors at UNM require a minor degree of study, as most of you know, as arts and sciences advisors, right? The options are pretty diverse for students. Online programs, which I'll get into differentiating a bit later, they can be offered in 8-week classes, which we consider here at UNM first half term and second half term, or the full term, which is a 16-week format. There can be courses with meeting times, courses that don't have meeting times, but for all of that is to say that if you have students that are considering coming to UNM, it is not a separate application. It would just be the regular, straightforward application process. UNM Online is not its own like college entity, right? We're like I had mentioned earlier. So the application process is the same. It's just a matter of the students selecting the online version of the program that they're interested in on their actual application. And sort of in line with that, online degrees are no different than in-person degrees. So that means that all financial aid and scholarships will apply to all of those degrees. I'll go through these quickly because you can find this information on our website. But here is a list of our undergraduate degrees. We have a little key, I guess you can say, on our website that we use. The little thunderbolt there is the key to know if you are looking for the accelerated online programs, which I'll talk a little bit more about. We do have some undergraduate degrees in the health industry, which are really geared toward folks who are already working in these industries, maybe as an already practicing registered nurse or dental hygienist or radiology tech who just went straight into the field but didn't necessarily get their bachelor's degree. This is a way for them to do that. These do not include licensure. So if students are looking to start from the ground up, so to speak, and say, I want to be a nurse, that means that they have to go through College of Nursing to actually get into the program that will provide them with the nursing license. These are a list of our minors that really go hand in hand very well with the accelerated online programs. And certain program restrictions apply. It's kind of on a case-by-case basis. Most academic advisors at UNM will be able to coach students on how these will work and what maybe would be a good fit with some of the other online programs that they're considering. We have a great big long list of graduate degrees spanning all kinds of different entities. So a good distinction to note is that our undergraduate degrees are primarily degree completion. So what that means is you're basically working on the curriculum for the major, assuming that all of your general education is completed. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But for the graduate degrees, basically everything, all of the classes that you take are for the graduate degree, and that's it. There's no other like general education requirements in the master's level programs. And here are grad certificates. So these are a great way for supplemental types of instruction. Usually folks who consider these are already working in their fields, or they're looking to maybe change into maybe a sort of like social justice aspect, by maybe navigating laterally within their institution or another institution. So something like the Chicano studies, I talk to students a lot about that who are really just interested in that as a subject and want to have a little bit more leadership and experience within the job sector. So these are just kind of supplemental certificates that folks can enroll in. And as you can see, the top and bottom one are accelerated. So that means that the curriculum is built with the 8-week courses in mind. So defining a little bit more about the accelerated online programs. They use the same curriculum as their 16-week course counterparts. They're never taught by folks outside of the university. They're not farmed out to other folks to teach. They are built and taught by and quality reviewed in-house at UNM. They feature courses in 8 weeks. So instead of having to take 16-week classes that, you could only, if you're working, right, you can't really take that many 16-week classes at a time if you're working part or full time. With 8-week classes, you could take, if you wanted to take one class at a time, at the end of the semester, you would have already taken 2 classes. So it's just a way to maybe get through the degree a little bit faster. The tuition rate is the same regardless of whether folks reside in state or out of state. So if you have students that are considering UNM as an option, but they're going to be moving out of state, they can still attend UNM in one of our online degrees. I'll go into specifics of, what to tell them if that is the case in a little bit. The other perk about accelerated online programs is that there's actually courses that are built for accelerated online program students to enroll in. It's a means for us to track the AOP population of students, but it's also a means to say, to take up to leadership to say that these programs are actually very popular and have a lot of students enrolling in them. So AOPs are primarily asynchronous. So what that means is there's few meeting times. I've had a couple AOP classes that have meeting times myself. But generally speaking, it is an asynchronous format. So that means that it provides more flexibility for students because they don't have to log in at a live time, taking more time out of their work week. As I mentioned, and it really reflects in our population of students, perfect for those who work during the day, maybe have caretaking responsibility, or live too far away from main campus to make that commute. The really pivotal thing about our online programs is that they're really built for students who have already taken some classes elsewhere. So for those of you at community colleges with students who are maybe wanting to make that transition, urge them to take as many of those general education classes there while they're at the community college there. It will just make their transition a lot easier to UNM main campus. And as I mentioned earlier, online degrees are the same as their in-person counterparts. They have the same weight, same relevance. On transcripts, it will not say that the degree was completed online. As I mentioned, earlier, a little bit about that degree completion piece. For for all undergraduates considering online education, even from the beginning as freshmen, we urge them to really have that in-person experience at UNM if they're still working on their general education requirements. Most of these are going to be in person anyway. We do offer some general education online, but it's not enough to fulfill all of the gen ed requirements that students need. And as I mentioned, it's the full master's program for graduate students. And we get a lot of questions about completion time. I wish that there was a straightforward answer to that question. It's just a big, it depends. It really depends on how many classes students can take at a time and what types of classes they want to take. 16-week courses, if you kind of do out the math, it's going to take about 2 years to get through. With an accelerated online program, it can be a bit faster because, as I mentioned, you'll have 8-week courses instead of 16. So just to define a couple of terms, because we throw these around a lot and assume that everyone knows what they mean, and maybe they don't. So as I mentioned, asynchronous means that there are no live meeting times for online classes. Synchronous is that there are scheduled live meeting times. I'll go into a couple resources for you all later in our slides so that you can actually see very clearly what online classes have meeting times and which don't, just so you're keeping all of that in mind as you advise students. I've mentioned the 8-week versus the 16-week terms. And of course, online classes vary. My presentation today is just covering stuff about main campus, not necessarily all the online course options at branch campuses. Those are all individually run by those branch campuses. And just as a little bit of note, for those of you who talk to students who are considering online education, they can be challenging, the courses. They take a lot more time than you would think, maybe assume. There's the technology aspect, although students don't have to be very like tech savvy to do online courses. They do need to, I would say, have the ability to be agile with technology, right? Be able to pick things up relatively quickly. Generally speaking, the only technology aspect for online classes is doing stuff in the learning management system, which is Canvas. And Canvas is a really great, straightforward, intuitive system that just takes a little bit of playing with to get used to. It's like anything else, right? But it's a lot more intuitive than the system that we used to have. So hopefully that's kind of curtailing some students' technology woes if they have them. And if students do have issues, we can help them through that process. Academic advisors have a lot on their plates, but the really great sort of service that we can provide as integrated advisors here at UNM Online, myself and Rick, is that we have a little bit more time to go into depth with students on that nitty gritty. Like, I don't know how to turn in an assignment. I just need your help. We're more than happy to hop on a Zoom call with students and sort of go through that process with them. There's also the discipline piece. From personal experience, I never took online classes as an undergrad. I maybe took like a handful. But then with this job and going into an online program myself for master's program, learning how to do online coursework was very challenging. The discipline had to be very strong. Like I would have to basically plan out my next 8 weeks on a calendar with what all was due because I'm a visual person and I need to have like a physical calendar in front of me to see everything. So it's really just finding that balance and really relying on discipline as an online student. Here's a little bit about some of the different online course types that we have at UNM. For those of you who aren't at UNM, we offer a lot of different types of online classes. We offer the in-person classes as well, but we also offer a hybrid, which might look like a Tuesday, Thursday class. Tuesday has a meeting day in person, and then Thursday has an online meeting component on Zoom or something like that. Online max classes for students who are looking for fully online classes, that's what they should be looking for, is that online max designation. It is 100% online. There are no meeting times. AOP courses are specifically reserved for students who are in an accelerated online program. Online plus classroom isn't that popular of a method, although they are still out there. And so it's basically you can do classroom component and online component. Um, and then, of course, web enhanced, which is going to just be a face-to-face course that has a learning management system component. So there's a course section in Canvas as a sort of like component of that in-person class. So I mentioned earlier that in our blog, we busted some of these online education myths. I think that this is good information to know, especially for those of you who have students who are really considering coming to UNM and taking everything that they can online. As I mentioned, you don't necessarily need to be tech savvy to succeed in online courses. As long as you have the learning management system down, you're probably good to go. Another big assumption is that online classes are easier than their face-to-face counterparts. As I mentioned, in my undergrad, I only did face-to-face classes because I was in literature and art history classes. There's something to that, right? There's a type of student that really needs to be like sitting in front of a human being and listening to them talk in order for them to learn. But some folks don't necessarily need that component, right? They're a little bit more independent. They absorb information by reading and discussing information with their other course mates. So I would say that online classes aren't necessarily easier. As I mentioned, they take a little bit more time, more discipline. That goes along with that other one, with a couple bullets down, that they require less time. They tend to take, they tend to necessitate even more time than an in-person course would, because of that aspect of you're needing to split up all of your coursework and your readings and your discussions and your due dates for your papers on your own, right? You have to plan for all of those things, obviously in accordance with all of your deadlines. But the assumption that online classes are easier just isn't necessarily true. Online learning, I think folks hear online classes and think that it's just going to be like this boring thing that you click through and then you're done, right? It's not like that at all. In the courses that I've taken for my master's program, which is the Organization, Information, and Learning Sciences program, it's been very surprising how diverse the coursework is. So not only do you have readings, but you have discussions with your classmates. You have journals that you do and complete and send, turn in to the instructor. Sometimes the live meetings, add a little bit more of a component of like more things to do, right? And so in the end, you have a lot of interaction with other students. Sometimes so much so that I've heard students in my cohort sort of him and haw about, I don't know if I want to do this because there is so much group work in this particular, field or things like that. So you can always refer students to us when they're thinking about these things. We don't know all of the curriculum for every single program, but with the experience that I have and my coworkers have with not just online education, but education more generally, students can come to us and ask those types of questions. Like, is this program going to be group work heavy? Is it going to be semi-independent? We can have that conversation with them. I think there's also an assumption that online courses are not as high quality. That's just not true, especially with accelerated online program courses. In our department, we have a dedicated instructional designer who reviews courses in accordance with a rubric that she helped develop with the Center for Teaching and Learning at UNM. Center for Teaching and Learning is what houses all of our tutors here at UNM and is just a really great place that works to make our courses at UNM extremely high quality. So they are not going to be boring, click through only lectures, and that's it. They are very dynamic and full of different activities. The next one, I don't want to come across as being a deterrent that anyone can succeed in online courses. It's true. Anyone as long as the format works for you, right? I mentioned earlier that there's that type of student that really needs to go physically to a classroom, sit down and listen to people talk to them, right? For someone like that, online education probably isn't going to be the best route for them. And as the advisors, we need to really make that distinction clear for students. I think it's so important for students to identify what their learning style is, or at least how they enjoy learning, right? If they don't enjoy going and sitting in a classroom and just being a sponge, then they might enjoy online classes a little bit more since there's more discussion. It's a little bit more flexible, right? You don't have to commute to campus. There's all kinds of perks of online education. So I don't want that to come across as a deterrent. It just isn't for everybody. And I think students really have to be honest with themselves about how they want their education to be. Online classes being completely self-paced is not necessarily true. Even though there are those asynchronous classes with no meeting times, there are still deadlines in place that students have to adhere to, whether they're weekly, bi-weekly. That's all going to depend on the type of class. So it's totally up to the instructor of how they structure it, but it's not just going to be something that they can take like 2 years to complete. There are going to be deadlines in place for them. Online classes being more expensive is not necessarily true. It's kind of another thing of the answer here is not very straightforward. So that's why we're here to have those conversations with students. Accelerated online programs specifically can be more costly to in-state students just because of how the tuition is structured. But that's something that if you have any questions about, talk to us. We'll be able to explain it a little bit better, just depending on your specific cases for students. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's still an assumption that, oh, I got this degree online, it doesn't really mean anything. Well, that's not true. You at the end get a diploma that says bachelor's or master's. It does not say online on it anywhere because you completed the curriculum that you would have completed for an in-person program anyway. So they're not valued less by employers because they won't even be able to tell the difference. So I think this is really the meat and like what folks should take away from this presentation along with those myths, was just how to sort of have that conversation with students who are wanting to do online education. As I mentioned earlier, our online programs for undergraduates are really designed for students who are coming in with some transfer coursework. if they have a full associate's degree, they're going to their transition to UNM Maine is going to be simpler because they will have less general education requirements. In some cases, they're all completed, and maybe there's just a couple classes that are UNM specific that they would need to complete. So really, we urge folks to tell students if they're at a community college to finish their associates there, because they'll not only save money in the process, but they can dive right in to the major requirements once they transfer to UNM. For current students at UNM, they, as I mentioned, they don't need to reapply to the university. It's just a matter of changing their major. So whenever you talk to students who are thinking about, okay, I'm in this program and I want to see if I can do it online, you can absolutely refer them to us to have that conversation, because as you saw in our list, we don't offer every single degree online. So that's the first consideration, is the program that I'm in even offered online. The second would be um, just making that transition and where the student is currently in the curriculum. It's very important that they meet with the academic advisor for the new program, for the online program that they're looking to come into. For that academic advisor to basically make sure that they're not skipping a beat, and the courses that they have completed will apply, and the new courses are the ones that they need to be taking, right? Because if you're coming into an accelerated online program, there are specific courses that you have to register for, and your academic advisor will be the person that will know exactly which of those courses to register for. Um, I have this, I had a thought, but I'm going to mention it in a later slide. Um, so at any community college or a branch, urge your students to complete those general education requirements, because like I said, the transition for them is going to be a lot smoother if they come in with an associate's degree already. If they are in a position where they can't wait, I've talked to students who are just kind of antsy and they want to do something else, or they want a change of scenery, or whatever the case may be. We do offer some general education courses online and in the AOP format, but not enough to fully do your entire 2 years of gen eds online. And just because, we're trying to provide well-rounded, worldly students, right? And I think that that necessitates coming to campus for that sort of like lively, typical college experience before maybe making the decision to take it online and finish or something like that. Students should always stay mindful of their attempted versus their completed credit hours. This is a conversation that they can also have with an academic advisor when they come to UNM, because that will impact their financial aid, as I'm sure you all know. And lastly, for most programs, it's best that students sort of pick a lane. And by that, I mean, if a student is wanting to come to UNM in person, they can certainly take some online classes, okay? They can do a mixture. But if they are really adamant about being only in online classes, then the accelerated online program route is probably going to be for them. Once they're in that accelerated online program, however, their curriculum gets a little bit more structured and not as flexible. And by that, I mean just they're having to take 8-week classes, which is one more sort of filter, right? And then Another filter is when those classes are offered. So maybe there is a class that they need in the spring, but it's only offered in the fall, right? So there's just a little bit more budgeting there. We also want students to not go back and forth between an accelerated online program and not because of the tuition difference. If they're in an accelerated online program specifically, they get their own tuition rate and it's its own separate thing. If they're just here on campus wanting to do both, have some in-person classes, some online, then they're still classified as that regular student and follow regular tuition and fees here at UNM. There's a very clear breakdown on the bursar's website about all of the tuition, but that's what I mean by pick a version and stick to it. All right. So some of the common new student issues that we see, at least in talking with students, are really overcoming that learning curve. As I mentioned to you all earlier, I overcame my own in a big way when I started my online journey as a student, taking online classes for the first time. The discipline piece is huge. I would encourage students to log in on the first day that the class starts. When classes begin, whether it's full term or 8-week, the first day of classes is when their class will show up in Canvas. And I urge them to, before you get too far behind, you should be logging in every day, right? Best practices as an online student, log in every day, check your email every day. But really logging in on that first day is a good day to just get your bearings about you, explore Canvas, look around and see kind of how the course is structured. Because of the pacing of 8-week classes, if you don't have that structure down, I even find myself at times like, wait, where was that thing that I needed? I don't remember where it was organized in the class. So it's really important for them to know the structure of the online course. Usually it'll be like grouped into modules potentially. Sometimes there'll be separate areas for where their discussions appear. There's an area where their grades are. So just having them get the lay of the land on the first day is a really good tip for them. Keeping on top of communications, like I said, super important, especially for online students, to be logging in and checking their email daily. And I think something that is a consideration for online students is they need to be a little bit more vocal about what they need, right? Because they don't have someone there in the class sitting with them physically, they need to reach out. We don't know how to help them if we don't hear from them. So urge them to not be shy, even if they are shy. Urge them to not be shy and reach out to either fellow classmates or to myself or Rick for those resources. Another thing I would say to students who are really considering online education is starting slow, especially with those 8-week classes because of all the things I mentioned already, right? They are very fast-paced and time consuming. So students who've never taken online classes before may be jolted with that initial like, wow, this is moving very quickly. So it's best for them to start slow. They can have a conversation with their academic advisor about how many credit hours they need to be enrolled in to meet their financial aid, right? If they're wanting to utilize, for instance, the Opportunity Scholarship for adult learners who are coming to UNM for the first time, transferring to UNM, they have to be enrolled in at least 6 credit hours. So that means that they would be taking 2 8-week classes in a semester. That means from I'll just use this semester as an example. From January to March will be one class. From March to May will be another class. So they'll only be in one class at a time, but at the end of the semester, they'll have two classes. After that first semester, I think something in their mind will shift on like expectations of the time and the pacing, and then they'll be able to make that decision for themselves on okay, maybe I'm ready to take on more. And we have students who take like 18 credit hours of 8-week classes, which I think is just totally cuckoo, but some students can do it, right? So it's really just meeting your students where they are and really having an honest conversation about like what they can do and what they're ready for. And then this is just kind of a general thing, as I'm sure all of you know. I think students who are coming to UNM for the first time may be, well, one, overwhelmed with just like the scale of everything. Um, Online classes can be very large, but they can also be very small. So, you know, there's a lot of variation there. And so when they are embarking on this journey, we just ask to be cognizant about acronyms, and really simpling down the language for students. That's why I gave you all a definition of terms, right? Because we all want to be able to have very open and clear conversations, which is a very big tenet with online learning, is being transparent and very clear. Um, as I mentioned, of course, many times already, that time management is going to be probably the biggest challenge and biggest victory for online students, because once you've got it, you feel really good. You feel like, I got this. I can do this fast pace, and it just gives you that little push that you need sometimes. I think that students online, especially, really need to constantly remind themselves of why they're doing this, because it's so easy to stop. And I'm speaking from purely personal experience. Almost on a daily basis, I'm asking myself, why did I do this master's program? Why did I think this was going to be such a great idea? Well, you have to take a step back and really have clear reasons of, what's my why? Why am I doing this? And so I think that's a really big piece for students to keep in mind, because it can be discouraging. It can be a bummer. It can be so much of their time, especially when you're working, right? So coming back to that, as well as just budgeting your time. Knowing your faculty, as I mentioned, students in an online setting really do need to be a little bit more proactive about reaching out if they're unsure about things, because they don't have someone that they can just like whisper to, you know, sitting next to them in a class. They have to put themselves out there. So even if they're a little bit shy, I think online education is really great because it can take away that intimidation factor for students when they're talking to faculty, because it's not this scary person that is in front of the room who is like in this position of power, right? Because there's like this separation. I mean, when you're online, you're all on the same screen and you're all in the same little boxes, right? So it takes an element of um, that intimidation away. And so we urge students to really follow up with their faculty with any questions that they have that are specific to the class. Um, Faculty will be very transparent about how to reach them, when to reach them, because they have crazy schedules, right? Between the classes they teach and the research that they're doing, they will very clearly lay out for students when and where to contact them. So pretty much everything is going to be in the syllabus, right? Remind students that it's probably there, because it is easy to get overwhelmed. But really, when you're overwhelmed, I think the best thing is to just like go back to the syllabus to get centered. And I think that's really the big thing here, is staying calm, um, but managing your time, right? And connect with others. Online education is one of those things that you get out what you put in. I'm a firm believer of that, having taken online courses for a year already. Yikes. And it's really about making those connections with people. And that's what's going to, again, give students a little bit of wind in their sails to stay on track and to stay focused. You do meet some really great students in your groups, in your group work, in your discussions. And so I would just urge students to, stay on top of their organization, compartmentalize, right? Know when the time is for eating and sleeping and taking care of yourself and doing school, right? All of those things. Um, these were some resources that I wanted to share with you all, which are UNM specific. So, UNM folks, this, but for those of you who aren't at UNM, urge your students to go to the degrees page. So degrees.unm.edu is a handy website that lists every single degree that UNM offers. That's sort of a great place to start. If they're looking for online degrees specifically, refer them to us and our webpage, which I'll get to in a little bit, because that will break down. These are the online programs specifically. So they can open up those two websites and tabs and just sort of do a comparison there, shopping for their degree. Excuse me. So prospective students can also actually schedule time to meet with an academic advisor. So while they're welcome to reach out to us, and we're sort of that like first step, we provide general information, we can help them determine what program or programs they're looking at. They can go to Lobo Achieve and actually schedule with an academic advisor for that program to see which is going to be a better fit. I have a lot of students do that. They're maybe going back and forth from a couple different degrees and they don't really know which is going to be the right one for them. After they do some comparison shopping on our website, I usually will tell them, well, you can schedule with an academic advisor. Talk to them about what the curriculum looks like. Talk to them about what students who have this degree do, because that academic advisor is going to be the subject matter expert in that degree. So push that out as a resource. It's just loboachieve.unm.edu. Students will use that non-UNM sign-in that you can see very, very small on the upper right of the screen. They'll create an account and be able to schedule a time to meet with an academic advisor here at UNM. And as I mentioned earlier, our blog is a really great resource for students to read about specific degree programs, read about what it's like being an online student at UNM. You can see those are the 3 most recent blogs on our page there. And we're having more input from students, which is so great to hear, because we want to hear from our online students, because they're quiet because they got a lot going on, right? They're working, they are doing school probably as like a secondary thing. And so it's really important that we get their perspectives and hear from them. And so we had a guest student come on and write a really inspiring blog about her story, what she's been through, and just getting through as an online student. I would urge you all to read that one and refer our blog out to folks who are really considering online education. For those of you who are interested in this, in staying on top of what online students face, some issues, we have a monthly meeting of, there's a lot of you in this call are in SOS. So hi, SOS peeps. It's great to see you. If you want to join the group, please reach out to us. We would love to have you. It's just a space kind of like this where we just have focused conversations about online student issues on a monthly basis. And that's about it for me. Um, please screenshot this. If someone hasn't gotten to the questions in the chat, I will. But there's our contact information. Please refer students to our website, online.unm.edu, for online courses, online degree programs, and if they're really just not sure where to start, they can reach out to myself, Rick, or Samantha if they're in that initial applying phase. And I think that's it. Thank you for your time.